Hey everyone, this is Josh,
And that's Jordan.
and we're both from Rapido Trains Inc., and we're here today at BART's Richmond repair facility at the Richmond Yard in California, and we're looking at the BART cars in kind of honor of our recent launch of our HO scale models.
Yep. We also brought a third guy, but I'm not sure where he is. He's probably hiding under a car somewhere.
Anyways, so we're going to be doing some measurements today. We've already got a lot of our HO scale model down pat, but we want to make sure some details are kind of the correct size and whatnot. So we're going to be using some measuring.
Yeah, and we're also going to be talking with someone from BART on a lot of the history of the car and a lot of the finer details that we still need to learn.
Yep, so why don't we jump right into the prototype details now? So I'm here with Jay Sate. We're in Legacy A car 1195. You can see the number up there. And I thought this would be a good time to go over the history of the BART cars and give us some prototype info. So why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. So BART's turning 50 this year, and so are a lot of the cars. We're actually still using a large part of the original fleet, which is pretty unconventional. It's one of the oldest fleets in the country as a result of that. So these cars, the Legacy fleet, the A and B originals, were put into service with the opening of the system. And were built by Roar Industries, same as your turboliner.
Yep.
And these are actually some of the last Roar equipment that you can ride today. But we are still running them into the dirt here at BART, just because they are still working for us. The fleet of the future that we have now, though it's been in service for a while, so we need to come up with a new name, because it's about to be the fleet of the present.
Yep.
Those are the D and the E. The D have full-width cabs. The E's are the center cars. And that's the whole BART fleet. You know, we've been here 50 years, there's 5 car types. The A cars are iconic to the area with the streamlined cab, specifically designed because in the late 60s when BART was being built, the idea of just like trains as a whole, especially for passengers, not very popular.
Yep.
Even like subways and metros, so it's not only like all of your passenger trains in the late 60s were in decline. So they tried really hard to make BART as untrained as possible while still having it be a train. We looked at some stuff earlier from the archives. They thought about making this a monorail, like a suspended monorail or rubber tires, and thankfully ended up with this totally conventional supported track system rather than anything a bit stranger.
But it's a great design. I mean, it's one of those kind of timeless designs that you don't really need to change.
Exactly. And I mean, that's largely, these trains have gotten pretty beat up, but how successfully forward-thinking BART was for the 60s. You know, in some of the earlier proposals, we have retro it looking like 50s stuff, and it would not have aged as well. The fact that this was 60s designed, 70s built, could have aged really badly. And these cars are still iconic, and they're beautiful. I think that's part of the reason they're so
well. It comes right out of the space age. And, around
in fact,
Apollo and stuff like that.
One of my favorite things. So these were designed by Sundberg Farrar, who have done a bunch of other designs and trains. They're a popular, famous industrial designer. But working for Sundberg Farrar at the time, and who actually worked on the BART cars, was Sid Mead, who became this unbelievably famous sci-fi concept artist after being an industrial designer and designing the BART cars. So he later did, so it's if you ever look at his resume, it's BART cars and then Blade Runner and Tron.
Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, so the whole idea was to sell this as this modern, clean, automated rapid transit system, so we needed a space-age design. They've been beaten up since, but they've held up. There was a big rebuild in the early 90s.
Yep.
But that was mostly a propulsion thing. The interiors were modernized and changed. They removed some seats for accessible areas and for bicycle areas and things. But they're almost identical. I don't know if there's any system that has had so little evolution and such a long time using its original fleet.
What's the top speed? 70, something like that?
These can do 80, but they run them at 70 to keep schedules and for reduced wear and tear. But sometimes if your train's late, to get back on schedule, they'll actually open the throttle all the way up, which is pretty cool. So you can do 80 and pass the cars on the freeway, which was always the design, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're competing in the 60s. You're competing with kind of the car revolution.
I remember seeing some videos in the past. There's stuff on YouTube and just going over some of the highway proposals that they were looking at in San Francisco in the 50s and 60s, and just what could have been and what we've got now.
My favorite one of those was they needed the increased capacity across the Golden Gate. So one of the plans was we'll build a second Golden Gate Bridge next to the first one. We'll have them be paired. And thankfully, BART kind of prevented us from some of those really car-centric outcomes that would have changed the skyline, perhaps.
Exactly.
Technically, the organization that manages BART is the BART District, Bay Area Rapid Transit District. And at the very beginning, they did the acronym for the whole thing. So BART-D or BART-D, if you really want to pronounce it.
It doesn't sound
But
quite...
somebody pretty quickly realized that BART-D
Yeah.
is not the way to sell your transit system. So they went straight for BART. And it's stuck since. We're using the same logo, which has been fantastic. So, you can see this great archival stuff, and they've got the classic, you've got it on the hard hat. I'm pointing to my non-existent hard hat.
Right up
but,
there.
It's been there since the start. People say it evokes the Transbay tube with the two holes, but it's apparently not designed for that, so it's just a nice coincidence. BART kind of exists in this strange halfway point between your usual subway system, like you'd see in New York or Chicago or Toronto, and your commuter rail system, like you'd see in New York or Chicago or Toronto. But we kind of hit right in between. So, we're up at Richmond right now. There are trains here that run direct to San Jose, and that rides about an hour and 20 minutes on one of these. And our longest line is 60 miles, which is twice the length of the longest in New York. We're almost at the point where we need a cafe car.
It's probably not a bad idea, actually.
I mean, I've been pushing for it. Maybe I'll have to get one of the models and custom detail it myself and then pitch it and be like, hey,
you can
look
do
how
that.
nice this would be.
We'll make a video out of that about putting passengers in BART cars.
See, and it's BART for BART, just BAR, lowercase t. We're already there.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about the A cars. So what about, we've got the B cars and the C cars. Why don't you talk about those for just a couple minutes?
For sure. So the B cars are the center cars, so no cab on either end.
Yep.
And those are also from the original system, most of them. And some B cars that we have today are actually A cars that have had the cabs removed. Because, for how futuristic the A cars looked, they weren't very practical. BART used to change the lengths of trains a lot more. We still change them a lot. You'll see moves in yards of drilling cars back and forth. And having specific end cars that were directional became a huge operational annoyance.
Oh, absolutely. I can see that.
So by the late 80s, the mid to late 80s, they introduced the C car, which is essentially, it's a 70-foot long car with a flat end like the B car, but it has a cab on the end. So it can be used either in the middle of the trains. They've got a fold-out door with a pop-out diaphragm, which is actually pretty funky. But you can walk through and cross through, so they can have those in the middle and have them open, or they can have them on the end of cars and they just close the passage door, they close the front diaphragm door, and it's a full width cab. So the first batch of C's, the C1s, were Alstom, and then we went and contracted out with MK to do the C2s, which were the second batch. They are identical, functionally completely identical. The C2s were a bit of problem children, though, so those have all been retired, actually. We finished our retirement of those a year or two ago. The C1s are still in service. They're being retired next. And we're actually about to be left with kind of the dream of original BART. We'll be back of A's and B's, at least with the legacy fleet.
Now, we get a lot of people ask us already, kind of what kind of prompted this whole project to come together.
So we reached out to you guys, actually. It's our 50th anniversary. The legacy fleet is due to be retired fairly soon, and we wanted to kind of pay respects to an icon. So we need to get a model made. In the past, people at BART had reached out to other people and not really gotten great responses. And I just joined, and I'm like, I know the perfect guys for this. We have weird, oddball, 60s, 70s retro equipment made by Roar. I know just who to ask.
And so you asked the weird, oddball
model train company
who
love 60s, 70s stuff and stuff made by Roar.
Exactly.
It ended up, it's sort of a match made in heaven. I was so excited, literally, I'm sure you could go back and see my emails and things. They got back to me. This is so, they're interested in it. And, I think all I had to do, I had to get some little turbo train merchandise, put it on the shelf behind me for the first couple calls, and sold.
As soon as the boss saw that, that's all you need to do. So he had your attention. So.
It's been a fantastic to work with you guys so far as well, and to be able to do them justice too. The only time there have ever been models of BART, they look like a kid's drawing of BART almost.
Exactly.
They are so crude. They are not proportional, and just we need to do it properly, and we need to get the people who we knew could do them properly.
Exactly. So on that note, why don't we head over to Josh? I think he's around here somewhere. It might be actually underneath, looking at some some details and doing some measurements. We'll go over to Josh. He can talk about the models and some of the features we're putting into them.
Thanks, Jordan. So I'm actually under one of the B cars right now, 1694 to be exact. And I'm actually in a spot where there's a little bit of headroom because right here in the pit, it's not exactly my 6 foot 1 inch clearance. So I'm actually going to talk now about some of the details underneath this car and what's going to appear on the model and some of the operating characteristics that we hope to achieve with the model.
Now, one thing to note is that these designs are not yet finalized, but I will touch on a couple of the unique details we've designed into these BART models, as well as some others that we're still working on. First, let's look at some of the exterior details. Intermediate couplers between the cars will use a drawbar and an NEM coupling system, most commonly found on European models. This allows the train to look prototypical on straight sections with very little gap between each car, yet still allows operation around curves down to 18-inch radius. We're using the same design on our Roar Turboliner model. Hey, another Roar product. How about that? The front coupler on the A cars will be a dummy coupler, but it will feature the prototypical swing under design so that it can be tucked out of the way just like in normal operations. On the C cars, we'll be updating the design to include the NEM style coupler pocket so that either the dummy coupler can be used for aesthetics, or you can insert the regular drawbar connection and use these cars within the middle of your consist, just like the prototype. The front illuminated sign above the cab on the A cars, added in later years, and not a feature of the early cars when built, will be changed to an optional detail part so that modelers can add it or not, depending on the prototype era they wish to replicate. Nameplates on the sides of the cars will be pre-painted and included in the polybag. We are still working out the details, but the plan is to include blank plates and a decal sheet featuring a selection of predetermined numbers as well as number jumbles for you to completely customize your model to the exact number you would like. Looking between the cars, the metal guards will be included with each model for the customer to install separately, simply because they're such a small detail part and we don't want to see these get damaged during shipping. Now, let's take a look at the underbody details. The entire underbody has been designed based on blueprints and drawings graciously provided by the staff at BART. While most of the detail will be molded into the chassis to reduce the number of small parts, the level of detail is still what customers expect to find under a Rapido model. Looking closely underneath the floor and between some of the equipment boxes, we've managed to hide the motor and drive shaft so that it is entirely hidden from regular view. And we cannot forget about the highly detailed trucks. Now, before I go any further, yes, they're standard gauge trucks and not broad gauge trucks.
Standard gauge? Why did you go with standard gauge? Well, I thought Rapido prided itself on prototypical accuracy. I am aghast at this unconscionable violation of my human rights. This is not the way.
Well, the simple answer is we wanted these to be as accurate as possible, but within the limitations of the hobby. No one makes accurate broad gauge tracks for these trains to run on, and we certainly weren't going to force you to hand lay your own BART tracks to the correct gauge on elevated viaducts with all the third rail detail too. Actually, that would be kind of cool. We've even had some people suggest that we shrink the model so that HO gauge tracks look like broad gauge, but then it just wouldn't be an HO scale model, would it? Finally, let's go over some of the lighting features. These trains will feature working directional headlights and red taillights. They'll also have working interior lights, and each car can be turned on and off with the included magnetic wand. Because the couplers between the cars will feature electrical connections, these trains will literally be all-wheel pickup, so you'll have no issues running through special switches or track work, and you'll have flicker-free lighting for the entire train length. Our offering of HO scale BART cars will be available in powered ABBA sets, either with or without DCC sound, individual C cars, again with or without DCC and sound, and add-on B coaches so that you can make your train as long as humanly possible. Also, for those who might not have a full-fledged BART layout with all those awesome stations and viaducts, but you would still like to celebrate this transit icon, we'll be offering unpowered A cars in a display case that you can put on your desk, or your bookshelf, or mantle, or dining room table, or nightstand, or coffee table, or dashboard, or...
So thanks for joining us here at BART's Richmond Repair Facility. We've had a great time. We've looked at the prototypes. We talked about the models, and yeah, this has been great. Thanks, of course, to you, Jay, for helping us kind of put this whole project together and having a great launch. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have an order deadline, a conditional order deadline coming up.
Yeah, so the conditional order deadline for these trains is January the 15th, 2023. If you get your pre-orders in by that point, you'll also get a 5% discount applied to your order. It's also kind of our cutoff date, so by that point, we will get an idea of how many people want to get this model and if we're going to get enough orders to actually make it worthwhile. So if you really want one, get your orders in by January the 15th. And you can order that directly through our website, rapidotrains.com, your favorite retailer, or even BART's own store at railgoods.com.
And already I can say the orders have been terrific. So we're really optimistic that this is going to go through, and we'll after that kind of conditional deadline, we can start looking at doing some tooling.
That's awesome.
It is. It is.
You guys do know it's broad gauge, right?
Broad gauge?
Broad gauge?
Come on, Rapido, we already went over the whole gauge thing. You don't need to make another joke about it. I thought your videos were supposed to be professional.
Shops, and I'm here with Jay so close. Sate. So here we are in the shops. I'm with Jay Sate. Why
Almost.
am I saying H?
You're getting shops.
Shops.
I'm in the stops.
I'm in the stops with.
Big latte.
Latte. Shops.
This goes on the blooper reel.
Yeah, there will definitely be a blooper reel.
I was thinking more saute vegetables.
Yes.
That works too.
So I'm here with Jay. I'm not. This is like. Okay. Okay. Quiet on the set.